So let's talk about creating hard surface shapes with a little bit more curve to them. And so we're going to play around with the idea of creating some stuff like this. Now, there's a particular order this needs to be done in order for it to work out well, but it's really not that hard. It's easier than you probably think. So we're going to kind of build up off of that last video I did where we were just talking about creating n-gons in a plane and doing panels, something like a lawnmower. So the lawnmower practice video anyways. But let's just go for it. We're going to create some kind of interesting shape here perhaps. And we'll do that for now. We create the n-gon, right? So we select everything else, delete it. We have this left over. Now, a lot of you guys are going to go too far with this too fast. So the main thing here though, is we need to, let's just do this one. We need to break it into quads. So I've talked about converting n-gons into quads before, and it's very simple usually to do things like this. You can see we'll need another cut going through this area perhaps. Okay. And that's what we're going to get for this one in particular, but we can break it up a little bit more maybe. And kind of balance things out a bit. All right. Now, you guys are going to probably go too far, too quick on this. So let me show you what you probably will do and you shouldn't do. So you start making these kinds of shapes, start working them out. Doing stuff like this, just extruding edges, right? And merging some of these vertices back to the other vertex and merge at last. Okay. So, and then you probably start adding all of your holding edges, which we're not going to do, but that's probably what would happen. And then you try to deform these. So use proportional edit, say smoother sphere or something like that. You try to rotate this out and pull it out like this. And so like this does work with proportional edit, but even if we had holding edges in here, what ends up happening is it starts having like little weird discrepancies in the surface. It doesn't look right usually, all right, when you start to deform that kind of a mesh. So there's actually a trick to this. You need to deform this one and it needs more resolution. Generally speaking is what's going to happen. So you're just going to res it up by adding some loop cuts, something like that. Now you can deform it a lot easier. And we don't do the extensions just yet, right? Like the edges here. We do them after we get the shape that we want. So we can do, you know, proportional edit, the lattice modifier and all that fun stuff if we wanted. But now we do our extrusions. And we can start to work this whole section out. Doing some stuff like this, perhaps. Okay. Take that one down that way. Let's not do that edge. We'll just merge it back. And press F there. Okay. So easy enough. Next step. We don't do bevels either. We do creases. Okay. So let's crease certain edges. We'll do this top one all the way around. We'll hold this sharp, and this sharp by creasing it. So Shift E, by the way. That's all we're doing. We'll crease that one. We'll leave that rounded and we'll crease this one and this one. Come back over here. Let's Control 2 to subdivide it. Right click, shade smooth, and see what's going on here. So when we shade smooth, we can kind of see that the more resolution we add by hitting Control 1 through 5, we can see that it's going to get sharper and sharper, but that's not actually what we're paying attention to here. That's not what matters the most. What matters the most is that when we turn optimal display off, turn wireframes on. If you don't have that, turn them on here. We want to increase the resolution, but not too much. So like this is our original, this is our next step up. Maybe we want to do that. This might be too much. So just a level 1 subdivision. We're not doing anything more than that. Okay. We're just going to increase the resolution. This just creates nicer curves, basically is what's happening. So when we apply that, we go back into edit mode. If we subdivide again, we have the sharps still, or excuse me, the creases. So what we can do is we can just hit Shift E and get rid of those, but not yet. Grab one, Shift G, select crease. Control B, bevel this, mouse wheel up once, set it to a shape of 1, 2 segment. This is going to give us that Korean bevel setup like so. Some of these might get really narrow here. We might actually have to shift things around a little bit, but they might cross over each other, things like that. Just fix them up as needed. But you can see we can do that. We can bevel all this, right? Now we get rid of the creases. We don't want all anymore. Okay. Boom. Just like that, we have a nice, interesting subdivision mesh perhaps, but it's not fully flushed out. There's still other little things in here that could take place. Like we can try to join those perhaps. Things like that, right? Like we can clean this up a little bit more for sure. So let's try moving that back a bit. There you go. And if you want to do some reductions too, there's nothing wrong with that. Like you could just go through, you feel like it's too much, you know, in this area, you know, reduce it or shift it around, do whatever you got to do. But it should work out by the end of it. I think it was fun. So now use add-ons if you have them. You should be able to do something like this edge. You should be able to use loop tools and do something like G stretch perhaps, which just straightens it out, or machine tools, Alt A, straighten, one or the other. Not a big deal. Grab from there to there. You can do the same thing again. And you can start to knock out like a little curve there if you needed to. It's up to you. I like it rounded, so I'll leave that instead. And any of these little areas like this, by the way, you know, if you space these out, it creates more of a soft effect, basically. You can GG twice around, just make it a larger area. So let's just soften it out. It's too much. Just grab the edge, do that. And then turn the edges off in edit mode. Right, so it's really simple, right? And you can do all kinds of crazy shapes with this, and it's really nothing more than this. The trick is that just continuing to edit it is probably the hardest part. Like adding that detail back to it. Like there's all kinds of stuff going on here, right? How do you even begin to do nonsense like that? Well, you have to split things perhaps, or extrude them and then run edge loops for those extrusions and whatnot. So let's just say, for example, like right here, I want to go ahead and maybe inset like so. Sometimes you can't always get away with an inset because things start crossing each other too fast. What you can do is you can hit E, right click, and then scale. Okay. Pull it down perhaps, do something like that as well. So we can, you know, maybe push that section in there like that. All right. You grab this here, alt click it, select loops, boundary loop. And now maybe you do a bevel like this. Okay. And you can get that kind of result there. Some of these corners may not be doing exactly what you want either. You want to sharpen them up perhaps. You're going to have to do loop cuts. Okay. And this is going to terrify some of you, but you loop cut. And for now, that should do okay. But right here, we can merge at center, dissolve these. Okay. You can do this number. Sometimes it doesn't always work out as well as you would like, but a lot of times it works out pretty well. And you can see this one went kind of crazy. It went somewhere over here because that's what our edge flow was doing. So we don't want that. We have to redirect this thing. So let's just cut out the edge we wanted, not what it's doing. And you can see we can bring it down here. Edge at center. Get rid of that. Dissolve that. This whole section that we had going out this way. This one. Let's dissolve that. Okay. So that works out there as well. Get a nice sharp corner there. This can stay rounded. This is already, for the most part, okay. It might not be quite what you want either, though. Like you can think about different ways of working this, perhaps. If you wanted to slide some things around, dissolve some things, or merge some things, you could do that potentially. So I'll leave that one up to you, though, for the most part. Like doing, you know, simple little edits. A lot of times can go a long way. Something like that, maybe. Might work out. Who knows? What about going up, right? Well, let's take... yeah, let's do this section, actually. Inset, hold control, inset again. If needed, you can inset twice. you do something like that. So if you want more of a soft kind of form, you can do this. You don't always have to add holding edges on everything, but if you want it sharper, you can go ahead and bevel it as we did before. You don't have to necessarily do that either. You could just bevel the top perhaps, get it even sharper up there. But on the flip side of that, you could also just do a chamfer. So one segment bevel, and it stays a little bit softer and it doesn't get too crazy. You ever want to hold some of these edges sharp, you loop cut just like we did before. Okay, in our case, it's going to be way out here, which I don't really like, but we can do that. This one we can do down here. Same process. You'll have to fiddle around with that idea a little bit because you'll eventually find yourself wanting to do like a loop cut over here perhaps, right? And it doesn't work the same over here at this point. And we can't run loops through here. If we could try to knife cut this back out, but sometimes you want to run all your edge loops first before you start trying to merge things together. And in our case here, when we merge these together, we get this kind of a result. You see, so it still works technically, but it's just it's a little bit of a process. And so we can balance that differently. It might eat into the corner a little bit, but sometimes, you know, subdivision's hard to get exactly perfect all the time. So, you know, you got to make the best of what you got anyways. And sometimes, like, you know, it doesn't do quite what you want. You might run a triangle even. That's a possibility. It could happen. You can even try flattening that whole area out perhaps and doing something like that. See? And so it's still relatively curved, but it's not the same as it once was, right? We'll leave it for now. And then, yeah, that would come back down over to here at some point or another. You see exactly where that would end up going. Cut the triangle shape out if you need to, right? And so that's the process of working on these types of shapes. It's really quite simple. You can do this kind of over and over and over again if needed. It's really not a big deal. So we just use the cursor selector with C and then run all those out. This one I think I'm going to leave rounded, but I just wanted to sharpen up the top. So we can do that number. You can also grab these areas like this. There's a couple ideas here of what you can do with this. You can do things destructively. You hit Control V and maybe do something like smooth vertices, right? And you do that, set the number of mounts here, and you can just kind of smooth all that down perhaps and do something like that. It's a really nice look, right? But you don't have to do that destructively either. You can hit Control G and assign a vertex group. So your vertex groups, of course, are over here in this drop down, this data panel, right? And basically all these vertices have been assigned. If you want to remove them, you can remove them. Control G will now have additional options, so you don't have to necessarily come back over here unless you mess something up. But the main thing is that we can add other modifiers, like we do a smooth modifier. You can see we can use a vertex group. So we can add that to this, right? And then now we can just crank up the values here, and we can smooth that whole area. And you can see if we bump up the factor, set it to 1 maybe. Don't go too crazy with it. And the repeat amount will stop at, yeah, like 30 or something. You can type in a number here if you wanted. So if you want to just crank it to like 122 or something, you can do that as well. So that's a possibility. Not only that, but you can do other things too. I mean, you can do like displacements, right? And so displace right now, vertex group. You can set the strength values. You can do fun stuff like that. Maybe put this displace before the smooth and then push it down. And so the smooth will take effect on it the way you've set it up anyways. So let's see if that gives you a result you want. Yeah. So there's all kinds of cool little tricks like that all over the place, basically. The only problem with this one is that it really does, because of these poles in here, these end poles, you can kind of see those at the bottom, right? Those things can be a little bit challenging to fix sometimes. It's just what they are, but it's definitely something to maybe try to correct with sculpting tools later on when you destroy the mesh and make it destructive again. Otherwise, they're pretty hard to get rid of. Maybe get away with like cast modifier trying to fix it too. That might help. I'm not sure how I would set that one up. I haven't tried it, but it's possible, I think. It seems like it would be. Anyways, so yeah, not as challenging as you probably thought it was, right? It's rather simple, straightforward stuff. if we add these in here real quick, I just want to show you something. It should, okay. A lot of times the vertex groups don't update, but it did update, I guess. So maybe kind of pre-smooth this a little bit and then see what happens. Nah. Yeah, so a little bit goofy looking, huh? Anyways, it's kind of pushing it to the extremes there, so I don't know if that would help you out a lot. But maybe it's useful to you. Who knows? It's interesting, right? You can keep doing this, by the way, if you wanted to. You can grab areas, inset, add a vertex group, assign to new group. So your next displace, you would use that new group, right? Push it in maybe. All right. And we can maybe leave that alone down here. Just bevel this, mouse wheel it up. You can see the subdivision affects that. I don't know if I like that. So let's get rid of the smooth on it. Just leave the displace for now. All right. Yeah. So anyways, that's it for this video, guys. I was just trying to show you this one real quick. Some people are curious about, you know, what you can do with those types of shapes. This is exactly what you can do with those types of shapes. It becomes a lot more interesting the more you learn about tools. And, you know, there's like sculpting that goes on top of this possibly as well, which is more or less something like using a displace with the sculpt tools, but it's really up to you to determine what you're going to end up doing, because we go through all this trouble perhaps, and then at the end of it, you know, well, multi-res always likes to go first, so you'd have to do the multi-res destructively perhaps, and I don't know what happened there with that, but anyways, so yep, that's it, guys. That's how you end up creating those types of shapes. You spend some time on it and you'll end up with that one I had originally. It takes a little bit of time, but it does in fact work out. And so you'll eventually find yourself doing whatever edits you need to do, basically. Additional edits, anyways. I don't need that one. So you might do like loop tools and circle, set by radius, tweak it, rotate it if needed. All right, once you do that, you got the radius set, you can inset, inset, inset. You can add a holding edge here if you wanted. Well, it kind of already has one, just add a loop cut to the bottom of it maybe. But yeah, anytime you got to do that now, you know, give it some space so you can do it. And I think I used 2 faces on that one. Yeah. I don't know if that's going to work out here. Let's try it. Inset, loop tools, circle. Radius is already set. So we can move that somewhere like so. It's not quite the right area. Let's see if we can do that a little different. All right. Let's pull it out more this way and bring that in. Okay, unspiral it. Oh, inset it first too. Just balance it out. Inset it. Even if it clips a little like this, you can still use it. It'll be okay. When it subdivides, that'll more or less disappear almost. But yeah, so we're getting like perfect circles now. Next, basically the same sizes across the mesh. As for this piece here, if you guys are just curious, a lot of the times you can just extrude things as well. So, example, you do like an inset, like we did. When you're insetting, hit B. extrude, right click, and then I use machine tools to align to the like the right or something, right? I can pull it out a little. This edge here, just chamfer it. Don't do a full-on bevel. It's going to create a softer effect there. The end here, you can do that number. If you add loop cuts, and you do this kind of similar to what we did already, just don't send them all the way across the mesh sometimes, right? If you don't need to. But you can do loop cuts like this. You can see these ones want to expand outwards instead of collapse back downwards. So that's going to cause a little bit of problems for us. There's ways of localizing stuff like this, but it doesn't usually work out well. So like we would really want to think about where we're going to cut our edges out into and all that other fun stuff when doing this. In our case here, I'm going to bevel. This is another technique. And then you can dissolve, right? And this would normally run to that next like vertex that's up here, but this is a very long stretch. Just leave it as an end-on a lot of times. It might create a little distortion here. That's possible. You can try, just different techniques of like working this out, basically. There's different things you can try to do, like using triangles or n-gons or whatever. So like doubled up n-gons, who knew, right? Doesn't make sense. But if we look at this with subdivision, optimal display off, you'll see it's actually kind of doing what we want almost. This is technically not correct, but it is kind of collapsing down now in a more predictable manner. But it might be harder to do things like UV map it or deform it later on. So it's one of those little kind of goofy things, I guess. But yeah, you can see this one can go down here. It's fun. Can run all the way across too. Wouldn't matter. We got the same process over here. And almost the same process. Let's dissolve that. See? Not technically right, guys, but it works. So, use it if you find it useful, I guess. You can do that. Loop cut, pull it down. You ever want to change one of these after you've created it? You can still. You have to maybe Shift H. You can use sculpt tools or proportional edit when you do this. I use like the grab tool and do elastic deform maybe. Right, so you can change that a little bit after the fact. Alt H it back, and you'll notice one little issue we have here is it does get softer in this area. So you might want to just take that edge, and you got two options. You either tighten this one over here, or you tighten this one up. I think this one going up is a little bit better, but not too bad. What do we got going on here? What's this? Just an extra edge going through. I'm going to dissolve it. I don't think we need it. We'd be better off using this edge here and just GG in it twice and sliding it that way, I think. Since we have another edge in here. This is still, yeah, it's just crazy topo right now, but it's mostly working. Not sure why we ended up with that, doing that. It's okay there, I guess. It's not okay over here. Yeah, so we could just do that then. All right. I'm going to split these things out later on. Hey, take this edge. All right. If you can, what you can do is you can select this whole area, actually. You want to get a hold of that edge on the bottom. Okay. You can inset, hit O, and do an outset. Select more, separate selection. Okay. Grab all of that, boundary select it. So remember, select loops, boundary loop, E and Z. That'll be our little piece now. This one over here, easy as well. Why not? So they match. That way, we get this result going, right? So we can't split these things out later on. The loops are like the key to that, but you definitely can do it. So like this is getting a little bit too cramped in this area. It's too narrow. We're not going to have a good time trying to do that on this one. Fortunately, we already have kind of the right thing going on in here. So we could just try separating it right here at this point. And that might work out okay. It might not because of this weird corner that's going on here. I think it'll be all right. Let's just extrude it down a little bit and grab all that and extrude it down a little bit. See what happens. Yeah, see, it doesn't do quite right in that area. So we would want to correct all that before we moved on to doing that, which means spacing this out with like another additional edge, basically going in here, a little bit more spacing. But for the most part, this is the name of the game here with these kinds of pieces. It's really fun. I mean, let's be honest, it's just fun after a little while. You can try working out some stuff like this and maybe outset it a bit. Sometimes you got to turn edge rail on or off. In my case, I have to turn it off. I usually have it on. Separate, boundary select, extrude down in this case. Sometimes you got to go back through and push things in particular directions and like duplicate edges and do more work basically. So because they might not match up quite right or whatever. All right, I'll just assign that a material. I've had it set to viewport material, so you get the idea. Maybe go the other way with that actually. And make it a little bit brighter. So now we have two examples, right? Very simple and easy things to do. This one's not going to work out badly. Edge rail off. All right. It's another piece right there. So you can build things and deconstruct things, basically. Practice on these types of shapes. Go through this process. Have fun. I mean, really, it doesn't get no better than this, in my opinion. Creases, you know, a lot of people say don't use them. You can use them, and it's preferable that you do use them when you can. In a lot of situations, I know I've said it in the past, like, you know, I don't really use creases a whole lot, but for this type of stuff, I mean, it really does. It's almost needed for this kind of stuff like this, right? There's other modeling techniques where you use bevels or two subdivisions and things like that, but they don't quite deliver the same result. This is much, this works out much better, basically, right? And just have fun with it, really. And if you ever want to just relax a curve, you know, just balance it out. You can make that more curved in there. It's not like doing bevels with Boolean Ngon workflow. It's way easier to manage sometimes and to come up with like really clean, good results. It's very destructive. You can mess up, but enough trial and error and you'll realize that like you're in control of this basically. It's like your project now. Run through this a dozen times or so and it'll start to make more and more sense possibly. But anyways, if you like this video, just leave a like, subscribe to the channel, comment below, all that other fun stuff. These videos are a lot of fun to do, and I appreciate the feedback when I get it. So I'm going to move that, and I'm going to try to match this up here. Sometimes it's really hard to match these things. Let me show you this real quick since we're at it. when you have an edge like this and you're trying to match it, duplicate it, separate it. So P, separate selection. Now we have this, and we have this piece over here. We can grab this and join it to this. Control J, / to isolate. Go into edit mode. It's going to be backwards. If you don't see that, backface colon's not on. Alt N, flip it. Okay, flip your normals. And now AM, merge by distance. Set that as low as it goes. And you'll now have an exact match to it at least, right? So you're not going to be in this weird situation where like you are trying to like snap them together or something goofy like that. It's much easier to just duplicate it, flip the normals, and merge it back together basically. Okay, and there we have it. Why not? We'll do that. All right, so hope you enjoyed. Check it out on the next one. All right, take care.